Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download, including NYPD Law and Disorder. Before we get to this week's story, I'm going to go to the true crime section of the New York Post, which is always interesting. An 18-year-old man was struck and killed by a Queens subway train Monday morning after fleeing a fight with another teen. The pair were brawling on the platform on Elmhurst Avenue station around 11 a.m. before the tragedy occurred. The 18-year-old, whose identity has not been released, ran onto the tracks and into the tunnel trying to escape another 19-year-old when he reportedly slipped and fell on the tracks, according to cops. I mean, this is terrible, and this is young people just not thinking something through. I guess he was in a fight. Maybe he was losing and he decided to jump into the subway tunnel to get away. But we just had Marique Bartolis on the other day that was telling some transit stories. Very dangerous down there. Speaking of the subway and the city just throwing good money after bad, fare evasion is so rampant on city buses that almost half of all the riders aren't paying. You think? As scrambling transit officials deploy a new crew of enforcers to catch the freeloaders. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority unarmed fare inspectors will be stationed in buses and at bus stops after fare evasion skyrocketed from 21% to 50% in the first quarter of 2024, costing an estimated millions of dollars in lost revenue every year. So let me get this straight. People are getting on buses and not paying. The bus driver's not getting involved because they don't want to get their brains knocked in. So you're going to have unarmed monitors at these bus stops. These people are going to blow right past them, and anybody in their right mind isn't going to enforce this. You know, it's the same do-gooders that said, well, you know what? The police don't really know how to handle emotionally disturbed people. And you know what? Maybe they don't. But a guidance counselor with a guy with a knife running around in an apartment naked isn't going to be able to solve the problem either. They're just going to get people hurt. Either one of two things is going to happen. Several of these fare inspectors are going to get killed or seriously injured, or they're going to look the other way, and they're paying people to stop something that they're not going to be able to stop. So it's just the city creating jobs, and it's not going to do anything. NYPD cops fatally shoot suspect who refused to drop his gun in East Harlem. Cops shot and killed gun-toting suspect in East Harlem early Sunday morning. The NYPD was called to the Washington houses at the corner of 3rd Avenue and 104th Street just after 12:30 a.m. reports of a man with a gun. Well, from what the rest of the story goes, that they ordered him to drop the gun. He didn't drop the gun. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And now there's people, I didn't want to read the whole article, but then people are like, why didn't he use his taser? What if you miss with the taser? What if the taser doesn't affect him? What if the taser doesn't work? Someone has a gun, you use a gun. Unfortunately, you know, when things like that happen, people get hurt. A serial groper is on the loose in Park Slope, violating at least 4 women in late-night attacks near Prospect Park. Cops and terrified victims told the Post. All the attacks occurred between July 27th and August 14th within an 8-block radius of Prospect Park, where the perv, nicknamed the Park Slope Prowler by some, ran up to each of the women and grabbed their buttocks before sprinting off into darkness. This isn't funny, but, I mean, you got a weirdo on the loose, and probably, if not apprehended, he's going to get more and more brazen. Might even try raping some of these women. So I'm hoping that they catch this guy, because the longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get. Now, this story just kind of blew my mind. It's not about New York City, but it's in the New York area. An anesthesiologist in New York State pleaded guilty to drugging and sexually abusing his family's nanny while she slept in his home. Paul Giacopi, 60 years old, pled guilty before Putnam Judge Anthony Mole after being indicted by a grand jury in March. The victim told, now get this, the victim told investigators that on 4 occasions in late 2023, she fell asleep and woke up to a rag being held over her face and smelled chemicals, then blacked out. The woman then set up a camera to record her assailant on December 29, 2023. After sensing a rag over her face and blacking out, she awoke and viewed the contents on the camera. Video clips recorded by the camera showed Giacopi assaulting the victim. I got to ask, If that happened to me the first time, that would be more than enough to me to give up my nanny job or whatever job. You couldn't pay me enough. If I wake up, I'm talking to somebody, and then I wake up with a rag over my face, and I thought someone put a rag over my face. I'm not going to let it happen 3 more times. And then, you know what? It's not like that. It's not like she thought the guy was stealing DVDs out of her house, or a porch pirate taking your Amazon box out front. You think you're being sexually assaulted, and you smell chemicals and a rag on your face. So you know what? After the 3rd, 4th time, I'm going to catch this guy. I just think that's a bizarre. I mean, I believe it happened, but I don't know how much more evidence do you need that you have to set up a camera. So this is a story that happened to me over 20-something years ago. It's a fascinating story about my friend who died about 1.5 years ago on a Friday. It's probably about 5 o'clock. I was working till 6 p.m. 5 o'clock. Phone rings. I hear my lieutenant talking to somebody. It sounded like he knew the guy fairly well. He gets off the phone. He goes, Vic, I need you and your partner to go down to the Manhattan District Attorney's office and meet with this guy, Bill Greenbaum. He's got something for you guys he wants to look at. And I'm looking at my watch. Now, I love working overtime, but it was Friday, and it's 5 o'clock at night. And I'm saying to myself, most DAs, especially on a Friday, they're not picking up their phone after 3:30, 4 o'clock. This guy's calling from the Manhattan DA's office at 5 p.m. I'm like, where do you know this guy? He goes, oh, he's a heavy hitter. He's an old-time ADA. He goes, you're going to like him. I said, all right. So we don't get down to his office by about 6:30. Sitting in his office. He's the only one on the floor. It's the only lit office on the floor. We go in there, introduces himself as William Greenbaum, and he's got this case. And basically what he's got is there's this, I think he was a rabbi. He owned a parking lot in Midtown Manhattan or Lower Manhattan. It was an outdoor parking lot, and this guy cut through his parking lot to avoid a traffic light. And the rabbi that owned this parking lot was sick of people just cutting through there. So he got in front of the guy's car, and he told him, back out. I don't want you cutting through my parking lot. This thug gets out of the car, punches the guy in the face. The guy falls back, hits his head, and dies. Guy gets back in his car. I think he had 2 females with him, and he leaves. Somebody gets the license plate. The detectives get involved. They arrest the guy. And I said, well, what are you charging him with? Like murder or manslaughter? And he goes, no, we got to charge him with aggravated assault. I didn't, to this day, I don't understand why they didn't charge him with something more serious than aggravated assault. And I know the Jewish community was pissed off at this DA because he wasn't charging what they thought that he should. I said, well, what do you need me for? He says, when we did a search warrant at this guy's house or his car, he goes, we recovered all these documents. And there's tons of stuff with vehicle identification numbers and auto auctions out of state. And he goes, I don't know what to make heads or tails of it. He goes, the homicide detective didn't know what to make heads or tails of it. He goes, I worked on several cases when your lieutenant was a cop. He says, I wanted someone that knows something about vehicle identification numbers. I said, all right. So he gave me photocopies. It was a ton of stuff. It was like several accordion folders worth of photocopies. I felt bad for his paralegal. And took the stuff, and I said, well, give me a couple of days, and let me see if I can make heads or tails of it. So I'm going through this stuff, and I realize what this guy is doing is he's going to auto auctions with secondhand dealer's licenses, and then he's purchasing these wrecked cars, and then he's taking all the vehicle identification numbers off them, and then he's stealing cars or having cars stolen for him and putting them on cars and selling them for resale. I don't think he was the thief involved in this, but his name was on a lot of the paperwork. I think he was the paper guy. He was the one getting the titles. He might have even been going to the auctions. So I figure out that one of the cars he had recently sold was in an accident. I got the photos from the insurance company, and it looked like a train hit it. There was no way this car was going to be rebuilt. It didn't even go through. So in New York, if you have a car and it's involved in an accident and the insurance company sells it on a salvage title, it's stamped salvage. If you fix that, if someone else buys it, puts it back together, and wants to register it, DMV sees that salvage title and says, time out. We want to take a look at it. And I think, oh God, I'm so old. I think it's called a 907A inspection. So you have to take that rebuilt car to a New York State inspections place where they look at it. They look to see, A, is the car safe for the road? And B, where did these parts come from? Right? So the car was hit in the front. You replace the airbags. How come the airbags have the stickers taken off? Right? They'll take the parts off it. They'll keep the car sometimes. So this guy washed the title. So it was on I think it was on a, he washed the title to another state and then brought it back into New York, which is a crime with its, well, not a crime, but DMV would want to look at the car. So anyway, I find this car up in Putnam County. This DA, Bill Greenbaum, says, great, writes me a search warrant on a Friday afternoon. And I says, all right, well, we got 10 days to execute this warrant. I'll go get him Monday. And he goes, no, I want this car like now. I said, all right. Called up my lieutenant. He goes, well, that's overtime for us. We drive up on a Friday night to Putnam County. We go to these people's house. They're not home. They're at a pizzeria where the kid tells us where the family is. We wait for them. They come home. And these people had nothing to do with this. They bought a used car. And, you know, I felt terrible taking a car from this couple, and they really didn't know what to make of it. Brought the car. It was a Honda Accord. Brought the Honda Accord back to the Bronx. Saturday morning, got under the hood, found the confidential VIN numbers. Car was reported stolen, just as I thought. And we were able to prove with the paperwork that this guy purchased the salvage car, tagged it, changed the VIN numbers on it, and then resold it. I think again, this is 20-something years ago. I don't remember if I showed photos to the people that bought the car or anything. But anyway, we were able to charge him with that crime. So the reason the DA wanted me to do this was he was afraid that the guy was going to take the aggravated assault charge to trial, and there were problems with the case, and he was afraid he just wanted an airtight case. So we figured by adding the car on it with the threat that we were going to find more cars, the guy took a plea, I think, to 4 or 5 years in jail. So the DA was happy. I was happy. I made some overtime. But over time, I struck up a really good friendship with this district attorney. And he was an older man. He was in his 50s. I was in my 30s. And he was like a walking encyclopedia of crime of New York City. Like, he prosecuted some of the most high-profile cases in Manhattan. He prosecuted that Al-Hasid nose hair that killed the rabbi Monica Hani in Manhattan, and then nose hair and his guys were involved with the Blind Sheikh that planted the truck bomb for the first World Trade Center bombing. He prosecuted, oh God, he's got so many high profile. He prosecuted the case of that lunatic that pushed that girl in front of a subway train. He prosecuted a cop killer. I mean, this guy was no joke. He was a heavy hitter, and he got all the controversial or high profile homicide cases. But by the time I came to him, he was still doing it, but he basically had taken a step back and was mentoring other district attorneys. So I would stop by his office from time to time, and you just couldn't just stop by and say hello. He'd go, sit down. And you'd sit, and he would just talk. But I found the guy fascinating. So one day, this is after a couple of years after the case I was involved with him, I'm out at the Whitestone Pound, and I'm looking at a car, some precinct voucher to Lincoln Navigator. They were under the impression that A, the car was tagged, and B, it had traps. A trap is a secret compartment that's secreted inside a vehicle. And I'll never forget, it was like January or February. It was freezing out there. Cell phone's ringing. I see it's Bill Greenbaum. Hey, Bill, what's going on? He goes, I have a favor to ask. And this wasn't the first time Bill called me with a favor. And a lot of times it was car related, but I was also very good at finding people that didn't want to be found. So on a couple of his cases where he had witnesses that he tried to send a subpoena to or send a subpoena to, and they weren't showing up, or he didn't think they would show up, he would contact me. And since my lieutenant knew him, it was not like a bother. So I would go and find his witnesses or track something down for him. And I didn't mind because he was just such a nice guy, and I just found the guy so interesting. I says, what do you need? He goes, I need you to find somebody. And I said, okay. I says, a witness? He goes, well, no, he's kind of a possible murder suspect. So I was like, murder suspect? Now that got my attention. I go, all right, I'll come down. I'll come down tomorrow. We'll go over, because I wanted him to tell me on the phone. He goes, no, just come down. It's just too much to go into. So the next day I go down to his office, and this is where the story really kind of takes twists and turns. It's a wild story. The guy he wants me to find is this guy by the name of Justin Bressman. Justin Bressman is suspected in a homicide. So Justin Bressman supposedly kills this guy on the Lower West Side of Manhattan, in Manhattan South. I think it was in the 10th precinct. And he kills a construction worker, supposedly. And the construction worker's going to work. It's like 6 a.m., and Justin Bressman walks up to this guy and shoots the guy right in the face with a .22 pistol with a silencer and leaves. And he's pretty sure that this Justin Bressman has committed the crime. And I says, well, what's his story? He goes, he's involved with this guy that owns a gym, and they're bodybuilders, and He goes, they're suspected in a bunch of armed robberies. And I says, okay. He says, I says, what's the timeline on this? Because I wanted to know, like, does he want this ASAP or can I take my time? He goes, no, you could take your time with it, which I was kind of shocked. And I go, why? He goes, well, the feds are looking into it because they suspect there's armored car robberies and a homicide with an armored car robbery. And, the FBI, anything that you fuck around with a bank or an armored car, FDIC insurance. So now the FBI is on it. He says that they're going to probably try to take this from me. And I go, then why are we doing this? He goes, because if you find him and I can charge him with a homicide, it won't be as easy for them to take it away from me. I was like, oh. So for 2 weeks, I'm trying to find this Justin Bresson. All I know is he vanishes. Oh, well, that's another thing. I says, well, do you think he's in the wind or something happened to him? He goes, well, that's the thing. He says his car turned up burnt in Brooklyn a couple of weeks after this homicide. Just, he's from the Bronx, I think he was. The car turns up in Brooklyn. It's burnt. And his father is telling anybody that will listen, including us, you don't know my kid. Something's happened to him. And Bill Greenbaum was under the impression, he goes, I'm not sure if he's a concerned father and he's losing his mind. He goes, that his kid is missing, or his kid's in the wind trying to duck out of this homicide, and the father's blowing a smoke screen to kind of push us in another direction. He goes, I can't. He goes, it's just too close to tell. I don't understand it. I said, all right. So for 2 weeks, I'm looking for this Justin Bresson. I did summons checks on the car before and after. I mean, before the car turned up burnt, looking at different addresses. I don't know if Bill had phone records. Again, this is so long ago. 2 weeks of nosing around. My lieutenant actually was like, hey, my cases are piling up. And my lieutenant's like, Vic, I need you to get back to work. So I said, all right, let me call Bill. So I called Bill up and I says, listen, Bill, I've been messing around with this thing for 2 weeks. I go, it's one of two things, and I know this isn't what you want to hear. I go, he's either dead and buried, or he's really good and really, made the accommodations to go underground, and he's not going to turn up anytime soon. He goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, my bureau chief really wants me to hand this off to the FBI. He goes, I guess I'm going to do that. So I said, all right, well, if there's anything else I can do for you. He goes, no, you've done enough. Thank you, and blah, 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 blah. So I forgot about Justin Bresson. I forgot about everything. A couple of years later, Bill retires. I stopped by his office one day, and he's packing up his boxes, and I go, oh, you're retiring? He goes, yeah. I go, they're going to throw a party? He goes, no, I don't want a party. He goes, I've done this long enough. And that's the thing with district attorneys. Most of them, so they're not high-paying jobs for a new prosecutor. So usually the way it works is young law school grads get a job as a prosecutor at a district attorney's office. They're not making much money, and they usually have to sign a 3-year or 4-year, depends on the office, commitment letter. And once they're up, they can either re-up and make more money with the DA's office. I'm sure they give them a raise. But what most of them do is they're prosecutors for the trial experience. And the second they're done with their commitment to the DA's office, what do? They jump the fence and they become defense attorneys, because unfortunately the reality is there's more money to be made keeping somebody out of jail than there is trying to put somebody in jail. So, I sat down and Bill stopped putting his boxes away, and, I felt bad he was retiring, and, he was just like an icon in that office, and I had really had this friendship with him that went about 4 or 5 years, and I felt bad he was retiring. And we kept in touch for a while. And then a year or two later, I retired, and then I connected with his son on Facebook because Bill didn't have a social media presence. And I would talk to the son sometimes, how's your dad doing and stuff. And it's on me. I really should have kept a relationship with this guy, but, life gets in the way, and I didn't. So I saw, unfortunately, it's a year and a half now, Bill Greenbaum passed away, unfortunately, out of state, and I feel terrible about it. And again, the guy was an iconic prosecutor. You guys can look him up. You'll see all the cases he prosecuted. And I was thinking about all the time I spent with him in his office, and I said, the name Justin Bresson popped into my head, and I go, oh, whatever happened to Justin Bresson? I wondered, that was the connection, the last thing I worked on with Bill. So what I did was I Googled the name Justin Bresson, and boy, did the story take a turn and twist and turn. So remember I told you there was a gym owner involved and everything? Okay. So as per a New York Post article, all right, so if I get something wrong, this is from a 2013 New York Post article. There's a guy who owns a gym. He's a wealthy guy. His name was Christian Tarantino. and he was making money hand over fist during a series of armed robberies that the Gambino crime family, John Gotti Jr., caught wind of him making all this money robbing banks, that he tried squeezing him for a piece of the pie. So during one of these bank robberies, this guy, Christian Tarantino, kills an armored car driver. All right? Like I said, robbing a bank brings the FBI or an armored car. Kill somebody during the commission of it. They're never going to stop looking for you because they're going to make an example of you. So while he commits this armored car robbery and kills this guy and a couple other armored car robberies, he's got a business associate. Now, I don't know if this guy was involved with the armored car robberies, but he was definitely in business with this guy, Christian Tarantino. And his name was, I think it's Vincent Gargiulio. And Vincent Gargiulio's sister is Suzette Snyder, who is married to Dee Snyder of Twisted Sister. I think that was the band. And this guy, Gargiulio, records Tarantino and gets him on tape to talk about armored car robberies and possibly the homicide. And this guy, Vincent Gargiulio, thinks, I'm going to blackmail this guy, Christian Tarantino, the gym owner, and he's going to give me some cash, not realizing how dangerous of a guy. This guy's already killed an armored car driver. So, but before we get to Gargiulio, let me back up. Before Gargiulio tries blackmailing Quentin Tarantino, during one of these robberies, let's see, I got to get the name. During one of these robberies, Tarantino's, one of the guys helping him in the robbery, one of his co-defendants, is a guy by the name of Louis Dorval. Well, after he murders this armored car guy by the name of Julius Baumgart, he starts to think that his accomplice, Louis Dorval, is not going to hold up. So what he does is he lures this guy, Louis Dorval, someplace, kills him, stuffs him in a tool chest, and throws him overboard in the Atlantic. Well, a couple of months later, the trunk pops up with this guy folded up in a thing. So they're already looking at this guy, Christian Tarantino, and that's when this guy, Louis Gargiulio, thinks he's going to extort him. So what Tarantino does is he has no intention of playing ball with this guy, Gargiulio, and giving him money. So what he does is he gets a hold of this kid, Justin Bressman, who I think worked in one of his gyms, and I don't know how much how involved he was with Tarantino with the armored car robberies. That I don't know. But he convinces Bressman, listen, this guy Gargiulio's got to go. I'll pay you $35,000. So what this guy Justin Bressman does is he brings a friend as a lookout. And basically what they do is they go down to this construction site where this guy Gargiulio works. I think he was a crane operator. He worked on a construction site in Lower Manhattan. And the plan was the lookout would spot him coming out of a place, I think after he got his breakfast or something. Gargiulio walks up to the guy, and Gargiulio recognizes Bressman and lets his guard in and goes, hey, what are you doing here? Bressman goes to put his hand out to shake his hand, while Gargiulio goes to put his lunchbox on the floor and his hard hat to shake his hand. Bressman sticks the .22 caliber silence-equipped pistol and shoots the guy in the face and walks away. That's why the lookout wind up testifying against everybody. So in the end, the FBI got involved, and like everything else, all things come to an end. In the end, Christian Tarantino was charged with the murder of the armored car driver, Julius Baumgart. He was charged with the murder of Louis Dorval. And to this day, and this will be 21 years now, Justin Bressman has not been found. No one's been charged in his disappearance or murder. And this guy, Christian Tarantino, was sentenced to jail, I think, on 2 or 3 life sentences. He's got Parkinson's disease. I know he gave a statement at his federal sentencing. He apologized. He still didn't give up what happened to Justin Bressman. And he said, well, basically, listen, I've been given 2 or 3 life sentences, and I got Parkinson's disease. So if you don't think I'm suffering, you're wrong. To me, that just indicates he's feeling sorry for himself. But, I mean, this guy had a heart. He would, this kid, Justin Bressman, supposedly, according to the New York Post and the FBI, he murdered this guy, Gargiulio. But still, he's got a family. I'm sure they'd love to know what happened to him. But I'm sure probably what happened is Tarantino learned from his mistakes the first time when he dumped this guy Dorval overboard. Probably made sure this guy wasn't going to come up or he buried him somewhere. So it's just sad all the way around. And like I said, when I was thinking about my friend Bill Greenbaum, this story came to light, and I just started thinking about it. And the more I researched it, I just couldn't believe, what I was sitting on some 20 years ago, that it turned out to be something this big. But like I said, in law enforcement, you never really know what's going to happen. Things take you for twists and turns. So that's my story for this week. I'm sticking by it. Hopefully next week I got a really special guest. The guy is super entertaining. I don't want to blow it. I don't want to jinx myself, but this guy is going to be a game changer. He's got some really fascinating stories. So again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, as always, including my listeners in Chicago, Illinois, Brooklyn, New York, Newark, New Jersey, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Brevard, North Carolina, and Casa Grande, Arizona, which I think means big house. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50. If you're watching this show on YouTube, please, please, please hit the like and subscribe button. I can use the listeners. Again, if you enjoy the content, please go to my Amazon book page. Just type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my books for free, including NYPD, Law and Disorder. My next book should be out by the holidays. I'll have the sketch hopefully next week I can show. It's called NYPD, Presumption and Dysfunction. Same genre, just with a lot of short, funny, interesting stories about my career with the New York City Police Department. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.